Hi, friends. It's Lacey from Pandemonium Publishing House, and I hope everyone is doing well. We have two special guests tonight, and they are James Steeves and also Lester Coloma. And here we go. So I've sent out an invitation to them, and I'm super excited to chat with them. Hi, Lester.
Hey Lacey, how are you?
How are you?
Very
Good, good,
good, thanks.
good. Thanks for being here. So,
Happy to
we're
be
going
here.
to chat with them and we are going to talk about art. We're going to talk about their books. We're going to talk about their process and a lot of other things. So, we're just waiting for James and he should be joining us at any second. How are you today, Lester?
Been very good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thanks. How is the weather in Ontario? I'm in Alberta and it's windy.
Weather here has been super cloudy today. Some
Yeah.
sun, which is good because I had to shoot some photographs for some artwork. So I did get some sun just in time to do my photographs. So it's been hit and miss with sun,
Awesome.
but winter's on its way, so can't deny that.
No, exactly. That's the thing, right? Winter is coming, and so far we've been really lucky with the weather, especially in the West, because I find what happens is that we'll get some kind of weather front, and then Ontario will get it maybe like 3 days later.
Yeah.
So, anyways, fingers crossed that it stays nice because it can be pretty brutal. The winters for sure, absolutely. Anybody who is not Canadian or not in those states that experience winter. I was in Texas once and they shut down the schools and roads and everything because they don't have the equipment for when it snows to
Yeah.
like remove everything. So that was a really interesting experience and thinking to myself, this is only a little bit of snow.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's weird because here in Ontario, I remember getting snow as early as like 1st of November, and it would last until April. But now it's not as bad. But I just remember the snowstorms we would get back in the 1970s. Geez, I'm kind of dating myself, but
Definitely.
yeah, they were bad.
Absolutely. It is. It's crazy. And I mean, the humidity for me, that's the thing that definitely does me in. And I'm not able to deal with like the wetness that you feel in your bones. Hi, James.
Hey,
Hello.
James.
How are ya?
All right.
Good, good, good. All right. We're so glad you could join us. And we've just been talking to Lester for a second about snow. We're not ready to have it yet anywhere, I don't think, across Canada, but we'll see what happens and how long we can stay out of it. So, yeah, thanks for being here.
Can you
And
can you see me okay?
yes, I can see you. I can
Oh,
see your poppy. And
oh,
just the if you just move your face up a little bit, we can see more of your your face there.
trying to figure out how to rotate the camera here.
No worries. There should be a button that is like two arrows in a circle,
Ah,
and that should be able to show you. There you go.
got
There you
it.
are.
Yeah,
There
I'm
we go.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're here with James Steeves and Lester Coloma, and we are going to talk about a whole bunch of things. What I think we should talk about first is your upcoming book, Lester Paints the Sky. So, but before we do that, I want to talk to you just for a second about I would love for you to tell our viewers who you are, just a little snippet about yourself, and the organizations and places that you've worked with or worked for so that they kind of get an example of what you do. And also, maybe if they're in Hamilton, they can see some things around the city that you've participated in. So let's start with Lester. You go ahead first.
Yeah, so I'm a mural painter based in Hamilton, born and raised in Hamilton, and I've been painting large-scale murals for close to 3 decades. I started working with a company in Toronto, and there I was part of a mural painting team, and we did over 180-foot long hand-painted murals for a restaurant franchise in the States. So that's how I kind of got into mural painting. And from there, I moved on to working on my own. Did some murals throughout Hamilton. I probably have about a dozen in Hamilton. And for people who are in Hamilton, I think the most popular one is Raise the Hammer, which is on like King Street in Victoria on two sides of the building. I have a Nikola Tesla painting. I have another one, the Super Crawl Elephant, which is on a bicycle on Cannon Street. That's a favorite for people. But I've been doing this, as I said, for 30 years, and currently I'm working with a engineering company down in North Dakota and doing a mural for one of their offices up in Canada. So
Wow.
it's been a lot of fun, yeah. And then
Oh, that's awesome.
working with James is super exciting as well.
Yay! Awesome. That is fabulous. And I know exactly what mural you're talking about in Hamilton. So yes, I have enjoyed your art even before I knew you, which is pretty cool. So that's exciting. James, what about you? Tell us about you.
I'm a teacher librarian with the Peel District School Board in Mississauga. I was born and raised in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I came up to Hamilton to do a doctorate in philosophy a while back, and have been teaching for 21 years in with the Peel District School Board. But I live in Hamilton. So,
Awesome.
and I guess I could add that for quite a while I've been involved in the Forced Reading programs. The Ontario Library Association runs an awards program, the biggest recreational reading program in Canada, I believe. And that involves shortlisting books of Canadian authors and then having kids actually vote for them in schools and public libraries. So I've been actively involved in that for a number of years as well.
Wow, that's so exciting. That is such fun. And the fact that they get to vote for their favorite books is pretty epic. So that must be something that's really enjoyable and changes throughout the years, obviously, with, different things that are happening and different themes and that sort of thing. So, how did you two, since you're together on the book, Lester Paints the Sky, how did you meet and how did you choose Lester for your illustrator or designer? Because you are the author, correct?
We both were co-authors, but I
Okay,
guess it's fair to say the idea was mine in the
sure.
beginning. Um, I've actually, the last 5 years or so, I've been writing mostly middle grade fiction, and I teach, I've been in middle school the whole time, actually 20 some years. I was working on a middle grade fiction novel about some of Lester's paintings. I've always been a huge fan of Lester's murals. They're all over the city for years and years and years. So in the story, the characters come to life and they do all kinds of silly things like characters in murals would do if they came to life. And it just, the story, it was fun and everything, but it wasn't really working. So I was doing some research more about Lester, and I found the video. And Lester knows the video I'm going to talk about when he was talking about some of his early influences and where he gets his ideas from with his art. And then he talked about he worked with his dad growing up, how his dad helped him with his artwork. His dad passed away, and then he stopped in this video for a moment and got really emotional. And he said, "I paint big pictures so my dad can see them from the sky."
Aw.
And I just thought that's the story that people want to hear. And so almost like a 180 complete with this project. And I started thinking maybe it would work better as a picture book because it's such a rich concept rather than, with a story where you have characters and relationships and stuff. So picture books was completely new to me, but I thought maybe it would work better as that. So I got a few ideas. And then one of the hardest things I ever did, I got up the courage to just cold call Lester with an email and say, "You don't know who I am or anything, but I want to write a picture book about you. What do you think?" And Lester said, "Sure, come down to my studio." And it was what, Lester, like within 15 minutes, and we were talking like we had been old school buddies hanging out in school libraries all our life. Like it was just
Absolutely.
so natural. Yeah.
That's so awesome. That's such a great story. And you know what? I have been so fortunate as your publisher to be able to see the artwork for this book. And James, let me tell you, when I saw the drawings that Lester had done, I felt this like visceral reaction that was so emotional. And Lester, do you remember when we were talking about them? And I just said to you, this is such stunning artwork, but it's so moving. And I felt like I was going to cry. And
Oh,
your talent is just phenomenal, but also the fact that it comes from such a place that is so authentic and so real, I think that's what does it. And talk about your process. How did you come up with the concept for this? You know, you're going from murals, which are huge, all the way down to a picture book that's like 8.5 by 8.5. So how do you
yeah.
translate that?
It's been really an interesting journey, and just working with James and trying to understand uh, what imagery we wanted to use and would best represent the storybook was something that was a lot of fun because we'd bounce ideas off each other. But there was a point where I would just have to, sit down and come up with the concepts and come up with the compositions. And I originally wanted to do these as large scale paintings, and I had some idea to do them digitally because it would be an interesting challenge, and it certainly is an interesting challenge for me. There's a bit of a learning curve because I've been painting traditionally for close to 30 years now, and large scale, as you said. So kind of shrinking it down and going from brushes and rollers to like a stylus and an iPad. Um, there were some interesting things that I could do and some limitations, and trying to understand the workflow because it was quite different from what I'm used to. Um, but still,
Sure.
it's a fun thing to kind of wrap my head around. And I think one of the biggest unexpected challenges was trying to put the emotion into the artwork and being so close to the source material. It's
Mm-hmm.
my dad passed away and my mom passed away 4 years ago. So just trying to figure out how to put the emotion into the artwork was difficult because I need to understand what I want to say emotionally. And if I haven't processed those emotions, then
Yeah.
there's a bit of a gap there trying to figure out what to say and how to say it. So that was kind of an unexpected thing as well.
For sure. That's completely understandable. And like you said, going from such a large scale to something a lot smaller is challenging in itself. But what it sounds like from both of you is that doing this has kind of been a transformational experience. And that's what I really love because that's what we try to teach here at Pandemonium Publishing House is transformational literacy. And James, for you to start out with a chapter book and then switch over to a children's book, that must have been a difficult experience in some ways because you're working with a large manuscript and now you've got like 850 words, right? So,
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
you kind of reconcile that process of what goes in the book and what do we cut?
Well, you start by reading a lot of books. Oh, I lost my there. By reading a lot. I joined CANSCAPE, the Canadian Society for Children's Authors, Illustrators, and Performers, and they have a lot of helpful workshops and things and writing groups and that sort of thing. Um, so I did a lot of research to see how a picture book works and how it's different from, of course, a novel or something else. So
Sure.
that was part of it. And then the trick with picture books is that always less is more, right? So
Yes.
the script that Lester and I came up with first off was about 1,200 words, 1,400 words, I think. And then you just keep whittling it down and whittling it down. Like the fewer words, the better, and let the
Yeah.
art speak for itself. And it's a lot about just finding like refining those words,
Yeah.
and finding, so you've got those strong verbs and all that kind of stuff, um, and just refining and chipping away. I don't even know what the final version is anymore. I've got so many different versions that we pass back and forth. I'm just going with what Lester's got on his wall in the studio there. Um, and I would say word bit would mean something a little bit different to Lester, and we're
Yeah.
wanting to be authentic with his family story. That especially that part when his mom's cooking up in the kitchen and he's smelling it when he's
Yeah.
working in the basement and so on. And so part of it was switching word to suit the Lester's experience, of course. And then part of it is trying to find those really strong words to make words really sing and to have them really sing well with the artwork.
Sure, absolutely. And the thing is, too, is that we always talk about how picture books, the illustrations and design fill in the words that we don't have time to say and fill in those themes and those gaps where we don't have enough time in the manuscript to explain that. So visually, it has to be really, really rich and very immersive for the readers at that age. You know, picture books between the ages of, like, say, 3 to 7, there's a lot visually happening in this book, but also it's done in such a way where it's very, like, the more that you read it, I find that you're finding new things every single time to look at, which I absolutely love. So Lester, can you explain a little bit about that in terms of being an artist and refining that process and how you decide that something's done? Is
That's
something
great.
ever really done? We're all
No,
artists
that
here. We're authors. It's never done. We look back at our
no,
first books and are like, oh, I wish I had said that differently, like 10 years later, right? So talk
no.
about that.
I was trying to explain this to someone, and especially working with a new medium, I kind of envision it as you're climbing a ladder as your skills improve. So as you get further up the ladder, you can kind of look back and see how far you've progressed. And I do a lot of back and forth. It's not a linear process for me at
Hmm.
times. So when I'm on that upper rung and I'm looking back at how far I've kind of learned things, I like to take that knowledge and put it into the older sketches because I want everything to be on the coherent side.
Hmm.
So trying to slip that in and then going back, it's a lot of back and forth trying to bring things up to a level that I want it to be.
Sure.
So is it ever done? Oh, that's a good question. I think uh, when when Lacey says don't touch it anymore, then it's
Stop
done.
touching it.
Exactly.
No, it's funny because we have that conversation with every single author and every illustrator. Is it done? Then yeah, for sure. But the thing is too, Lester, is that, doing this book and being so close to it and having such an interest in trying something new with this children's book, how do you begin that? Do you begin with sketches? Do you do paper and pencil? Like, what is your process in order to see this through to kind of the finished where we're working with it for publication? What do you start with? Let's start with that.
We'll start with working with James. We go through the
Okay.
manuscript and then
Yeah.
we kind of figure out what images we want. And then from there, I like to do word lists. So
Oh.
if there's a page that has an illustration that I want to explore, I'll go through word lists and think of everything that reminds me of it. And then from there, it will kind of create images in my head. And as these images evolve in my head, I'll use my sketchbook and come up with little concepts and ideas of all these little things. And I'll kind of let that marinate for a bit, and then I'll go on to the next. And
Hmm.
as I'm working through each illustration, I'll go back to ones that kind of feel like I can gel these little images and put them together. And once I have something that works, I still do the old analog pencil in the sketchbook. And then I'll bring it up into the iPad and sketch things out that way. And in the iPad, I can tweak composition, I can add a bit of color, and I can work on my lights and darks. So when I present it to you,
Hmm.
it looks a little more fleshed out. And I
Sure.
kind of like to have that so that if it makes, if it's understand, if I can understand it and you can understand it, then we can have a conversation about it a little more
Hmm.
in depth
Hmm.
versus me saying, well, this is supposed to be a flower. If I can
Right.
bring something to you a little more polished, then we
Yeah.
can develop our conversation a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's fantastic. And I've never heard of that process of making a word list. I love that. I think that's so brilliant because that really helps you capture those emotions and what do you want to say and how do we portray that emotion on the page. So that's very, very smart. We have a lot of interns that come through Pandemonium Publishing House, so I'm going to post this on YouTube and Facebook and all those places so that they can see author and illustrator and they can get some tips too. So, James, for you, refining this manuscript and going through and cutting the words and everything that we kind of talked about, when did you realize that, we're ready to go with this, we're going to trim this word count, but also without losing the essence of things? Because sometimes when we trim a lot, we lose the
Mhm.
messaging, and it's
Right.
really hard to kind of, be able to say, is this what I want the reader to leave with? And how do you make sure that you don't lose any of that when you're cutting so many words?
Right. Well, I don't know if I'll quite answer that question, but it kind of got me thinking that one of the interesting things with this project is that Lester's there and he's alive,
Yeah,
and so there's this whole as we're refining that story, like I have writing groups, so I was sharing it with them, and the writing groups are looking for different things than Lester, because for Lester it's
right.
like, does this suit what my family experience was like, and so on. And is it authentic? And whereas my writing group was looking at the narrative structure of it, and is it making sense, and are certain things missing? And I have to say, one of the funny things that kind of came up is some of the people in like the writing people that I was sharing it with were saying it's really a story between Lester and his dad, and so like having the mom in there complicates things, and you should take the mom out. And there's at least a couple times when, because we were sending manuscripts back and forth, I don't know how many, like 100 or so, right, over the course of it was a good year or so that we were doing that before Lester even got to the artwork of it. And a couple of times I took the mother out just to see if it worked better. And every time Lester would go through and it'd be line by line, he'd say, "Yeah, I really like this, and this is really good." And but where'd my mother go on this page?
Yeah.
And so there were some things like that, and the mother is still in the story because that's to make it authentic with Lester's experience. There were other things like the image that Lester draws and takes to school, and I think the original one that you said was a spider that your dad had made, and
That
we
was
had
a
talked.
frog.
Or frog, right?
Yeah, a little
We
frog.
so we had gone back and forth, and I was really big on the goldfish, on the orange fish, which is the one that kind of stayed. And there were different um, reasons for keeping that image and holding it through to the book. So that would be an instance where I think the story kind of the narrative kind of won.
Hmm.
Um, so it was a real interesting process, and a real like back and forth process between me kind of looking at the narrative side of it and Lester looking at the, like, this is my story, it's got to be accurate.
I'm going to chime in and say I'm going to speak on it from the neuroscience part of it. So the goldfish really resonates for kids because most kids have a goldfish as their first pet.
Mhm.
So there's an entirely different layer to how each of us looks at it, right? You're the authors, the artists, the publisher, and neuromarketing. So when we look at that and we use all of these things together, I think we've got a phenomenal book on our hands. And everything does work together. It all has to work in one, you know, gigantic kind of way in order to capture what needs to be captured, but also Lester and I, we had this conversation, I think, at our last meeting. How are we connecting with the readers? And that's the thing. It's a very personal story, but how do we not alienate those readers who, are just looking at this maybe from a perspective of, well, that didn't happen to me, or I don't know how to connect with this, or all of those kind of things that we talked about, Lester. And we really went through and decided, this has to stay. Maybe we have to make this the focal point. And I think that your absolute artistic genius is to be able to focus on the things that matter for each page. And how do you decide that? I know you have your word list, but what else is there? There's more to your process. And I want to hear about that in terms of connecting with your reader. How do you make sure that they're getting what you want them to get out of this story?
It's it's really tricky for me because I try and take two viewpoints. Firstly, I want to make sure that I'm representing my story and James
Yes,
writing as best as I can. So
of
I'm trying to
course.
put in as much emotion and putting my points of view into each illustration. And at the same time, I'm also trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to communicate?
Right.
And sometimes I can dilute my message by trying too hard to make everyone happy, because then I'm not making anyone happy.
That's right. If your
Uh,
book is for everyone, it's for no one. That's the number one rule of publishing. Okay.
yes. And so trying to decide on specific images that really can carry the narrative throughout each page. I try, like in the story, without spoiling too much,
Yeah, don't give it away.
there's a certain element in there that I try to carry through, that if you can kind of look at the images, you'll see it's a background character, but it's just as important as the people I try to represent. So there's a
Yes.
certain layering that I try to put into each illustration that aren't necessarily in the foreground, but
Hmm.
are just as important as the primary characters.
And that's something that we didn't plan from the beginning, right? Like that just sort of came
No.
about as we were working. It's like, wow, what's this other thing going on in the background? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that is something that you're going to notice, but you're going to notice it more once you go through that book a few times. And
Mhm.
that's what I love about it. It's so layered in such a way that you can't just read it once. You know, there's so many things in there to look at that are so representative and so subtle and so subconscious that it needs to be read over and over and over again. Now, this is a thing that we kind of struggled with a little bit as well. So, for a book that's so visually rich, like, yes, children's books are visually rich, we know that, but this one specifically, the artwork is much more, it's older. The artwork is
Mm,
older. It gives that older vibe of, being more mature. And this is a mature story, but it still relates to children and the whole childhood experience. Now, that being said, when we went through your book, we kind of asked each other, is this too old? Is
yeah.
this something? Let's talk about that, Lester.
Yeah, we kind of were seeing if the illustrations weren't on point with hitting the target market.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of back and forth. I would go into chapters to look at kids' books and really see, okay, am I doing the right thing here? Is my work gonna complement and support the story, complement James
Hmm.
and his writing? And it's funny, what kind of rang true was the whole comparison is the thief of joy kind of thing. That
Yes.
if you compare things too much, you're gonna miss out. So essentially, I just try to block out as many influences, but try to
Hmm.
be open as well, and trying keeping as much of my authentic voice and authentic hand in the artwork to see, hopefully that it'll connect.
Right. Absolutely. I think it will. James, what do you want readers to take from this book? What's the messaging you want them to leave with?
Well, the picture books are so interesting because I mean, when you talk about audience and the reader, that they're so hard because it's you're writing it for young kids, but it's being read to them by adults or possibly
Hmm.
by like older people, and it has to connect with all of those different generations.
Yes.
And that's where, like, when I, like, the middle grade book just wasn't kind of working. And then when I watched that video and I saw him make that sentiment about painting the big pictures to be seen from the world, I thought, like, a young kid can see that. And man, can an older person that's lost a few people in their life see that and
Yeah.
feel that too? And like that was, to me, that was kind of the universal and the particular. That was the
Hmm.
piece that I felt anyone could see. So that's, I think, what people walk away with. And
Yeah.
hopefully they come to Hamilton and look at some of these awesome murals too.
Absolutely. That is the goal for sure. Definitely. And so, that being said, I really love the overarching theme of this. And, exactly what you said about seeing those murals, being able to see them from that perspective. So, let's talk about perspective for a second, Lester. How do we transfer perspective to a page that's not 3D. You know, you were telling me something really interesting. You were working on a container and you have the ridges like the sea containers, right? And different angles would show you different things. And you wanted to kind of be able to see your images from very specific angles. How do you move your artwork from the real world 3D to flat pages? And how do you translate that perspective?
Okay. Good question, Lee.
I didn't
Um,
prep them for these questions at all. Like, we didn't do a run through or send them to you before. So these guys are on
no.
the spot.
So, trying to translate what I see, I think how I'm able to do it is just through the experiences that I have and the various filters that images that I see go through my head.
Okay.
Um, how I see things, I think I can kind of automatically translate them in my brain to how I want to represent them on a page. And that
Mm-hmm.
involves a lot of editing, a lot of simplifying, a lot of taking out unnecessary details and focusing on points that I really want to highlight. So if I'm doing an outdoor scene and there's all these trees, but I really want to focus on, let's say there's a sunflower in the foreground, I'll kind of desaturate everything around it and put all the details into the sunflower to make that the focal point. So as I'm working on the illustrations for the book, I'm trying to block out too much details that won't add to the story, but put enough
Mm-hmm.
details on the spots that I really want to carry the narrative.
You know what? That is absolute truth, because what you're doing is the same thing that James did with editing this, and you guys edited this together. But what I mean is you're editing your images. You are paring down your images. Less just like lowering your word count, but you're doing with it with images. And I always say that it's one of those situations where you really have to decide what moves the story forward. Like every sentence you're writing, what moves
Mhm.
the story forward? If it doesn't move the story forward, then it doesn't need to be in there, right? So, same with images as well. Now, James, with your creative process and with writing and all the groups that you're part of, what was some of the advice that you got that you thought, that's a really good point? I'm going to consider that. I know we talked about the images of Lester's mom. I love them. I think they work so well. And how do you know what advice to take and kind of what advice to say, you know what? I don't think that's going to work. It obviously depends on every individual project, but how do you know for our viewers out there when you're getting feedback of what to take and what to leave?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the more the writing writing is all about voice. And the more that you write and the more that you read, I mean, like anything, you kind of copy the people you admire first and then eventually find your own voice. But it's really just having confidence, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and getting it out on the page and putting it out to people. And I, whenever, like, well, right off, if you want to be a writer, you've got to get a writing group or you drive your family nuts. And
They
anything,
think you hung the moon anyways, so they're not going to give you the truth.
you're going to talk about your story all the time, and it's like, come on, like it's got to go to bed or whatever. But like getting a writing group that's going to be honest with you is really important. And taking whenever I get feedback, I'm not always thinking like, do I agree with everything that they say? What I'm thinking is, why are they thinking that? So
Yes.
it's my responsibility as the writer to communicate a certain idea. If they're not getting the idea, and it's very helpful in giving feedback to give suggestions and so on, but you don't always have to take what they suggest. But to me, it's always about where are they coming from? Why did they think that? Why did what I write lead them to think that way? And when you spin it that way, I mean, all feedback is good,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to kind of, but then it stays focused on your voice and what you want to say. The other
Yes.
thing the other thing I want to say add to that too is reading it out loud. Um,
Yes. Say
picture
it,
book,
James. Tell
picture
them.
book for sure. But I mean, what really got me into writing was this thing called COVID. You might have heard of it.
No, I blocked that out completely.
And so I'm a school librarian, and the libraries are closed. Kids don't have access to stories. And so I started reading books online out loud. And I think that that was a huge thing for me in developing my own voice was when you read it out loud, it's just a whole different engagement with the story and with the rhythm and the meter and so on. And so, like as Lester's refining certain things as we go back and forth with the images of the story. Before that, when we were going back and forth with the words, I mean, a lot of it was going through that rhythm and the meter and so on as well. So it's not just the individual words and sentences and making sure that you're refining it and only having what you need to carry the story forward. But does it
Hmm.
sound right? Because especially the picture books are going to be read out loud.
Yes. Definitely. Absolutely. Classrooms, libraries, parents to kids, kids that aren't reading on their own yet. So yeah, lots of instances where this is going to be a very auditory experience for sure. So let's talk about narration for a second. How did you choose the narration style and which narration style did you pick? What perspective?
Like from Lester's perspective, you mean?
No, from your perspective, when you were working on the manuscript, how did you choose which narrative voice to use?
Um, I don't know. It just seemed kind of natural.
It seemed natural. Okay, so it's not like you wrote it a few different times, in third person, and then you said, okay, I'm going to write this in first person. It sounds more natural. So the
Yeah,
auditory part of that helped you choose the narration, or did you
it
just
did,
sit down and
yeah.
write and then,
Some other stories I've written, I've switched like first to third and so on. This one, it was always third.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I remember going, even when I went to that first time when I met Lester, I had some ideas of where the story could go. Um,
mm-hmm,
but and then through the so like I had very specific questions that I was asking about that experience of learning to draw with his dad, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, and then from that, then the story started to take shape. But yeah, it was always through person. Um,
Okay,
and there were certainly some key moments that I wanted to capture, like
sure.
like the hospital scene, right? Like that's very moving, and then going to the
James, don't give it away.
and honestly, yeah, there were certain beats there that we certainly had in mind that we wanted to capture. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lester, let's talk about that. Your inspiration to become an artist, where did it from? Did you always know that you wanted to be an artist, or was it something that kind of you grew into? Can you talk about that?
Uh, it's I don't think I always wanted to be an artist, but I always wanted to do art. I didn't
Mm,
know at a young age that there was an option to have a career as an artist. So growing up, I was the artist of the class, and part of my influence was just learning more as I brought my artwork home to my dad to show him and kind of get some information and some critiques from him. So that kind of helped me develop my skill a lot more and just being always open to creativity, not just drawing, but I remember in grade school taking puppetry and making puppets. So there's all kinds of different forms of creativity that I was really interested in pursuing, and I just
hmm.
happened to end up as a mural painter.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, when we're talking about this, I think it's so important for kids to know that art is an option and it is available in so many different spaces. So, whether you're an artist, whether you're an illustrator, whether you're a graphic designer, whether you're an author, whether you're a publisher, teachers, all of those kind of professions, artwork kind of is this common thread that runs throughout that unites all of us. And I think that that's so special because if we're going to say the C word again, that part that we blocked out for, the pandemic, what did people lean on? They leaned on the authors, they leaned on the artists, they leaned on entertainment and all of those creatives because, that is essential work. Absolutely. I'm not discounting any of the nurses or any of those professions because they obviously need to get creative in ways as well, but in different ways. But that being said, that's what really kind of carried people through was music and movies and books and shows and all of these things. So I think that art is one of those absolute essentials that we need to continue. And this is one way of doing that. James, I don't want to kind of get into this topic too much, but in the school system, I see a lot of STEM, but I don't see a ton of STEAM. So we talk about, science, technology, English, and math, right? With the
Mhm.
A, we add the art. So what do you think the benefits of having kids in school learn about art and creativity? What are those? Give me like your top three.
Top three.
Yeah.
Um,
What are
I
the
mean,
benefits to kids about learning art and,
it,
and creativity?
it's a different way of thinking, for sure. Like that, it's the creative way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it connects us to the world and to other people. I don't know if that
Yes.
too, but I think a lot of it is about connection. Just like going out into to the schoolyard. I mean, I remember teaching science, and let's go into the schoolyard and draw a map of where the water runs after it rains. Just it's not in a textbook anymore. It's out there, and you're experiencing it. And it is kind of cool to see how the schoolyard actually slanted in certain ways to drain it. And then let's look up historical maps. See, I'm a history guy, so let's look
Mm-hmm.
up historical maps and see where the original streams and rivers went. Um, so like it's more than
See?
just the A, it's the history and the geography for me as well. And it's all about connection. It's how we are connected to the world around us, to the environment, to the animals,
Yes.
the frogs, the goldfish,
Yeah,
and to
and I love that
later.
imagery. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's so important that that thread runs through your work. Um, and also empathy and critical thinking skills, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And this is a really interesting book as well because it does deal with a very deep theme. And we know that kids are able to handle that in a way that
Yes.
makes sense and is understandable to them. So, I feel personally, and I said this to Lester before, I said, I feel like this is similar in who this is going to connect with to I'll Love You Forever with Robert Munch, right? So the story of his mother and him carrying her at the end and all of the things that she did for him and now they've role reversed, right? That sort of thing and the legacy that continues. So we're reaching, like you said, that target of those kids who are reading the book and being read to, and the parents and the grandparents and the aunts and uncles. So we're not saying this book is for everyone because it's for no one when we do that, right? But we're saying that it's multi-generational in ways that it connects. And that is the most important thing that we can do in art is that connection. And also with that empathy and being able to say, you know what, how do I feel about this? How would I feel if this happened to me? How would I feel and how would I express myself after the fact? So Lester, let's talk about, the way that not only you were able to bring this book to life, but there was probably a lot of stop and go and a lot of kind of reflection and a lot of stepping back from the artwork. Can you just give us a little bit of insight on that? Because as authors, what we do sometimes is we'll write a manuscript, we'll do our first draft, and we'll put it in a drawer and not look at it. Okay, because we need to get this away from us and we need to take some space. So with such a deep theme, how important was space for you?
Taking space is really important, especially if I'm trying to create emotional visuals.
Mm-hmm.
At times, I feel like um, I'll get caught up in an image and it's not working because I'm kind of I've hit a roadblock. So just
Right.
as you mentioned, how authors have to step away. Sometimes I'll take the image, I'll look at it through a mirror, so the image is reversed. I'll put it upside down on my iPad. I'll desaturate it. Any way to kind of trick my brain that I'm looking at something different, and maybe it'll kind of push me in a different direction, or I'll just I'll put it away. I'll go for a walk, or I'll go to the art gallery to kind of connect
Hmm.
my brain visually, but at different things, so that when I get back to it, then it's kind of refreshed and eager to get into it again.
Right, right. I think that's so smart. Such a good idea. Okay, so now we've talked about how Lester Paints the Sky. That's coming out soon. We'll let you know details about that when it's ready, and we'll do a launch and all of those great things. James, I want to talk to you about part of being part of our anthology. So
Yeah.
we did the anthology Darkness Falls, an autumn anthology, and you wrote, yeah, you got your copy. Awesome. So you wrote a home run for Maggie. Can you talk about that and how not only how it was different from writing a children's book, I think you've explained that, but how did you decide to submit that specific piece?
It's you talk about writing stories and they go on the shelf or in the drawer or whatever, and I have a number of those. So that was one of them. Another again, it was a middle grade novel, chapter one, which I changed when I saw the call, Darkness Falls and autumn themes and ghosts and so on. That is my go-to. Like that's where I started, was writing ghost stories for a middle grade audience. And I had that piece, so that I changed a little bit at the end of it to make it work as a short story because it's a little bit of a different character. Um, but yeah, it just seemed like it would fit the theme, and well, see, I was right, or Vanessa, or like you were right to put it in because the pieces they're all a little bit different. They're kind of neat how they all sort of work together.
Yeah, absolutely. That was all Vanessa. Not, I didn't have anything to do with it. I signed off on everything at the end. The editors were amazing.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
interned with
The
us and they were
artwork was
so great.
really cool too with it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome. What a great experience. So, that being said, this wasn't something that you created new. It was something that you kind of had put away. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
revisited? Okay.
and revisited for that purpose.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that's important for people to know that sometimes you just have something put away that will work for that kind of occasion where it comes up.
yeah, and
Lester, does that
if I
ever
can add
happen?
too, sorry, I was going to say too that for people that want to write, like just
Yeah,
because it's working today doesn't mean it can't become something tomorrow. Like write, like get it on the page and write as much as you can, and you never know
exactly.
where it's going to end up.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So, Lester, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you have art pieces that you've put away that you think will work for an idea later? Do you have like a book full of ideas?
Yeah, I have like my sketchbook is scribbles. It's not anything I would show at a museum or as an exhibit. There aren't finished, beautiful artworks in there. It's just grabbing ideas because sometimes I'll be on a walk and two concepts in my head will somehow come together and I'll think, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll need to capture that. And I might not use it in this book. I might not use it in a mural, but it's kind of out of my head and onto paper. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll flip through it every now and then, and some things will jump out, and it'll look like, oh, that's kind of a fun thing to further develop, or maybe it becomes a series of other drawings. And having things captured that way is really helpful to me because if I leave them in my head, they'll just float away and
Yes,
they'll be gone,
yes.
right?
Yep, absolutely. I think that's every creative idea. Get it on the page
Yes.
immediately, keep a notebook, whatever your phone app, whatever you're going to use, but don't say to yourself, "Oh, I'll remember this later. I'll just write it down when I get a chance," because you won't and it
You won't.
changes, right?
Exactly.
So, I think the last thing I'm going to ask you is both of you. This is a question for both, but obviously answer separately. Where does your inspiration for art come from? So, Lester, you go first.
Uh, Inspiration from art. I usually like to look at old masters in terms of structure, design, and detail.
Hmm.
But I also like to look at just nature because there's some interesting color combinations, interesting compositions. Sometimes just going for a walk out in the woods, you'll get
Hmm.
inspired by seeing things differently and how things kind of coordinate with each other. And
Yes.
it's good to get outside and kind of get that into your head.
Yeah,
And I,
definitely. We have the whole saying of touch grass, right?
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. James, what about you?
Well,
Same
Lester,
question.
we have to go canoeing sometime. You see, nature, we get together and we talk about, oh, we're canoeing or hiking or whatever, because I'm the same way. I love to get out into nature. Now, inspiration, I've been a teacher for a long time, and kids are very funny little beings running around the school, so I get lots of inspiration from there. I change the names though, but hey.
Of course, of
Um,
course.
so definitely inspiration from there, and like my ghost story past, I get my inspiration from local cemeteries. I love going and looking at the different tombstones and trying to figure out who the people are and what their past is, and there's just um, so many stories waiting to be told, and they're like literally outside of our door. Whether you're in
That's
Hamilton or I've just started writing something that's set in the Maritimes where I'm from. So wherever you are, there's so many stories and they're just waiting to be told.
Definitely. That is such great advice. And I'm going to add my one piece of advice before we go is to, if you ever feel stuck, change your space, change your environment, sleep on the opposite side of the bed, go to a different route, create those new neural pathways, drive to work a different way. You know, those kind of things that even eating with your opposite hand, that opens up those new ways of thinking and seeing the world. And Lester, you mentioned that when you flip your artwork upside down or you look at it
Mhm.
from a different direction. I can't stress enough how important that is to problem solve and to just get that cognitive ability to see things from a different perspective.
Mhm.
So, I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight, and I hope that everybody enjoyed this interview. And we can't wait to bring you this book, Lester Paints the Sky. We're not rushing you, Lester. But I just want to say that I know this is a process that takes time, but man, I can't wait for everyone to see this. This is a work of art, an absolute masterpiece. So thank you both for this wonderful book and for bringing it to Pandemonium Publishing House and for trusting us with something so important. So thank you for being here. Where can
Thank you for
everybody
having
follow you? Yeah. Where can
me.
we
Uh,
follow you?
I'm on Instagram, Lester Coloma Art, or on my website under Lester Coloma. Check it out.
Awesome. And
And
James?
my website, jamesstevesauthor.com, or jsteve71 on Instagram or X.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here tonight, gentlemen. And I look forward to the book coming out soon.
Thanks, Lacey. Nice
Thank
seeing you.
you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much
Later,
for tuning
James.
in, and we will see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.